Hello, highly esteemed learners. You're highly welcome to English with Teacher Dixon. Our English power up today is stress pattern. This is an aspect of suprasegmental sounds of English language. I laid emphasis on that while talking about the sounds of English language. That is my video on introduction to English sounds. So I mentioned that we have both segmental sounds and the supra-segmental sounds, or you can call it non-segmental sounds. So the segmental sounds are the phonemes, the 44 phonemes of English language, whereas the supra-segmental sounds or non-segmental sounds comprises the stress pattern, syllables, intonation, rhythm, and many others. So particularly for this class, I want to consider stress pattern. What is stress pattern all about and why is it necessary? Why is it necessary that you study and know the rules of stress in English language? It is important first in the sense that it will help your pronunciations of words. Second, it will help you to identify the rise and fall in words or in sentences when you're reading. It will give you the rhythm. You know when to raise your voice and when not to do so. So you know those words to articulate with emphasis and those ones you don't need to emphasize. All right, so stress pattern has to do with the audibility of a particular syllable of words. In other words, you have a word that is made up of two or more syllables. It is not all the syllables that will be stressed during pronunciation. So some syllables will be stressed while some will be unstressed. And we normally have one primary stressed syllable in a particular word, notwithstanding the number of syllables. So the stressed syllable is that syllable that emphasis is laid. It is that syllable that is more audible than others. That is to say, it is always pronounced louder than other syllables. So that is a stressed syllable. Now, how can we identify stressed syllables in words? How can we identify the syllable that is stressed in a particular word? Remember, this will help you to sound well when you're speaking. You're able to articulate words the way they are supposed to be articulated. So instead of saying biscuit, you will be able to say biscuit because you know that the stress is on the first syllable of that word, bis and not bees. So for this particular class, I want to consider two syllabic words, words with two syllables. How are they structured in terms of stress pattern? Where do we have the stress? If we have a noun, where do we have the stress? If we have a verb, adjective, and then adverb. So I want to specifically look into the four content words we have in English language. That is four parts of speech, which are nouns, verbs, adjective, and adverb. So let's look at the stress pattern for two-syllabic words in these word classes. All right, let's look at what we have here. The general topic is stress in two-syllable words. All right, so beginning from the nouns. Nouns with two syllables are stressed on the first syllable. First, what do we mean by syllables? The unit of word that is pronounced in one breath with one puff of air. For instance, table. We have table. So this is the first syllable, tay, and then the second syllable is bo. Hence, we have this. In the transcription of table, you have this symbol up here, which is the stress symbol. This is the stressed marker. Hence, where you have this in your dictionary, that is where the stress falls in that particular word. So in these nouns, if you look at the transcription, you have the stress symbol at the position of the first syllable. So this is table, window, doctor, student, and neighbor. Then, considering adjectives, what are adjectives? Those words that are used for description. In other words, descriptive words. Hence, most adjectives are stressed on the first syllable, just like nouns. Hence, we have happy, clever, quiet, simple. So, looking at the transcriptions of each of these words, you'll get to realize that we have the symbol of stress or the stressed marker on the first syllable. All right, so that is for adjective, descriptive words. I'm not saying this is a conclusion. There are some adjectives that might not have the stress on the first syllable, but it is in very rare cases. So most adjectives have that stress or accentuation on the first syllables. All right, let's also look at verbs. What are verbs? Action words, or words you use to indicate the state of being. All right, so we have a good number of verbs here, and you can consider with me and agree that the opposite is the case when it comes to verbs with two syllables. We have the stress on the stress on the second syllables when it comes to verbs. For instance, relax, attend, require, admit, receive, design, confirm, and condemn. And if you observe where we have letter A in these verbs, you have the schwa sound, vowel number 12, because it is the weakest of all the vowel sounds we have in English language. So we normally have the schwa sound, vowel number 12, in weak syllables. For instance, attend, admit, even, confirm, condemn. So look at the transcriptions of each of these verbs and also compare what we have here and what we have under noun and adjectives. For nouns and adjectives, the first syllable, that's why you hear table, ta. But for verbs, we have what? Relax, ta. As different from happy, we have relax, attend, require. All right, also we have adverbs. Adverbs are words used to modify the verb. In other words, to add more information to the verb. For instance, you can use an adverb to indicate the time. When you say by 3 o'clock, that is adverbial, giving more information to the action, to when the action was expressed or carried out. All right, so we have adverbs here, but a point of emphasis here is where do we have the stress pattern? We have the stress pattern on the first syllables of each of these words, each of these adverbs. Hence, we have adverbs ranging from always, often, really, very, and almost. So you can see here that the stress is on the first syllable. That's why we have this stressed marker or accentuation marker, this symbol on the first syllable of each of these words. So this is an indication that when you want to pronounce adverbs, especially those ones with two syllables, you have to lay emphasis on the first syllable. What do I mean by laying emphasis? Make the first syllable louder than any other syllable. All right. So, always, often, really, very, and almost. So this one is just like the nouns and the adjectives. Note this particular word, often. It is one word in free variation in the sense that it has more than one pronunciation. It is either you pronounce it as often or often. Hence the transcription. In the transcription, you see a sound in parentheses, that is in bracket. It is an indication that this sound is optional. You may wish to pronounce this word without the T sound, or you pronounce it with the T sound, often or often. So take note of that. But for this particular purpose, we are laying emphasis on where we have the stress, which is the first syllable. So a stress syllable is not only the loudest syllable, but also the longest syllable. That is to say, you must articulate the sound, the vowel sound you have there, long enough with full emphasis. All right, so we have always, often, really, very, and almost. Now, I'd like us to look at the comparison between these two class of words. We have the nouns and the verbs. But looking at this group of words, you can agree with me that they are the same in terms of spelling. But we have some differences in pronunciation, particularly in the stress pattern. For instance, the words we have under noun have that stressed on the first syllable, whereas the ones we have under verbs have that stressed on the second syllable. So even when they are spelled the same, they have different pronunciation. And the different pronunciation we have here also affects the meaning and function of each of the words. All right, so that is to say that we can also use stress pattern to indicate meaning. It can also show us the word class, a particular word belongs. All right, so look at the words we have here: record, present, subject, object, contract, import. These are all nouns, naming words, and the stress falls on the first syllable of each of these words. But for the words we have here, we have record, present, subject, object, contract, import. Here, the stress is on the second syllables, and the first syllables are weak. So when we use it this way, when we say record, it is an action. We are expressing an action, but when we say record, we are naming a concept. For instance, he recorded everything that was said during the meeting. Recorded there is a verb from record. But when you say the record of what was said in the meeting is with him, the record there is a noun. So note the difference between the use of these nouns and the use of these verbs. But a point of emphasis is that here we have the stress on the first syllables, whereas we have the stress on the second syllables here. I want to believe you've learned something from this particular lesson. Do well to subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment on it, and also share so that we can reach out to others who are in need of lessons like this. I remain your very own Teacher Dixon.